Welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Aamina Rafiq, the Superintendent Pharmacist at Simple Online Pharmacy. We often talk about the biology of weight loss, how hormones like GLP-1 control our hunger. But the missing piece of the puzzle for many is psychology. Joining me today is Diane Glancy, a Cognitive Behavioural Therapist. Welcome to the show, Diane. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do with patients, please?
Yep, sure. So I am a fully accredited Cognitive Behavioural Therapist, and I work for the NHS, but I also work privately and help people to make positive changes in their life for a range of different things, including weight loss, and more recently people who are on their GLP-1 journey, just to help them to try and make long-term sustainable positive changes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. So let's get started. We often talk about GLP-1s as a powerful tool, but they aren't a solo act. So our first question is, why is lifestyle change important for GLP-1 treatment?
Okay, so we know that GLP-1 can really introduce those biological drivers for suppressing appetite, for slowing down that food noise. And so that creates an excellent window for change. So lifestyle changes are really, really important, because if we don't change what we've always done, then perhaps when we either stop the GLP-1 journey, or we reduce it, or we change things that are happening, what can actually happen is old habits start to creep in again.
Okay.
And so we need to start doing something different. So CBT, from a cognitive behavioural therapy window, what we do is we help people to identify what are these unhelpful thinking styles that have been part of your journey up until now. A lot of the time they're not even aware of them. So we help them to identify them. Then we also help them to look at what are the emotions that these create and how do they make you behave. So CBT is built on a 3-system model, and it's thoughts, emotions and behaviours. So lifestyle factors are really, really important, because it's about creating new healthy habits. So for example, we would say to people, what about putting in place a regular breakfast, a regular walk, some exercise, some time for relaxation, some time for meditation. So all of these lifestyle factors are so important alongside your GLP-1 journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. There's a lot of anxiety about what happens when the treatment stops. We have a lot of patients who are maybe at that point in their journey, and they are a little bit nervous when they speak to us. So what happens if habits don't change? Okay.
So like I just touched on, if habits don't change, old habits creep back in. So what we can do with CBT is we can teach people to identify what the habits are in the first place. So for example, there may well be a habit of, when you get home from a long shift and it's cold and dark, you reach for that high fat sugary snack. A lot of the time you're not even consciously aware that you're doing that. So really tracking that behaviour and identifying what those triggers are can help you to start changing that and put something in place that's more healthy and more beneficial for you, rather than sabotaging your progress. I think for people who are on a GLP-1 journey, that anxiety will be there,
of course,
because they've had years up until now of feeling that they've failed, and feeling that their willpower has kind of let them down. So I think that allowing them to identify these unhelpful thinking styles, the emotions they evoke and the behaviours, can teach them new ways, not just for now, for the rest of their life.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Our next question that we have is around people often beating themselves up for failing, like we've just said, when they really just maybe lacked a system or a routine. What's the difference between willpower and habits?
So willpower is limited, and willpower relies on the prefrontal cortex part of your brain that controls decision making and impulses. That's hugely impacted by fatigue, stress, emotions, hormones, everyday life really. So the difference between willpower and habit is formed through repetition and reinforcement. So the first time we do a behaviour, it takes a conscious effort. The more we do that behaviour and repeat, it moves, it shifts from that prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia. That's a part of the brain that basically controls habit forming, and it controls automatic action. So the habit becomes automatic. It takes far less brain power for an automatic action than it does for willpower. So that's why habits are far more long-term than willpower alone.
Okay, so if we were to look at a patient's daily routine during the first month, what habits or behaviour do you consider most important to change during GLP-1 treatment?
Okay, during GLP-1 treatment, I would suggest getting the basics right. Nutrition, and not so much taking away, adding in.
Yep.
You know, flipping that on its head to a positive, adding in more whole foods, adding in regular meals to make sure that you're satiated, movement, a little bit of exercise. If you've never been to the gym, say I'm going to go twice, or a 10-minute walk, and sleep. Sleep is so critical for any kind of weight loss journey, because it impacts your emotion, it impacts your ability to regulate impulse control. So I would say, you know, get those basics right first. Other ways are to learn to respond to cues. So learning to respond to, am I actually hungry, or am I bored? Am I stressed? Am I tired? What do I actually need at this moment? Do I need a bath? Do I need a walk? Do I really need that bar of chocolate? So responding to cues and getting those basics of regular foods, diet, exercise and sleep. They would be my top tips.
I think the sleep one is an interesting one, because a lot of people maybe don't talk about it. When we talk about weight management journeys, it's psychology in terms of like behavioural thinking, but we don't dive deeper maybe into the sleep side of it, and you're just thinking lifestyle changes in terms of diet, exercise, and maybe using a treatment to help you with your weight loss journey. So sleep is a really interesting one, but you see a lot of studies around it and how it does impact weight journey, so that's a really good one. Okay, so to change how we act, we have to understand what's happening under the hood. So how are habits formed in the brain?
Okay, so like I just touched on that earlier, habits are formed in the brain through repetition and reinforcement. Okay, so for example, you decide that when you get up in the morning, you're going to have your coffee. It's an automatic thing. You come downstairs, you switch the kettle on, you make the coffee. You're not making a conscious decision. You're not making such effort every morning that you're going to do that. It becomes automatic. Again, if you think about decision making, that's all based on motivation and momentum. But automatic thoughts are based on repetition, keeping on doing the same thing every day until you end up with a positive habit. And turning unhelpful habits into positive ones can be really easy actually. It's just a case of identifying what the unhelpful habit is and turning it around and putting something in place to offset it.
So it's like changing your routine essentially, because like getting up in the morning, if you're having a coffee and something else, it's maybe just switching it. So it's just changing routines essentially is what would maybe help a lot of people. So that's really interesting. I think it's hard as well maybe for a lot of people to feel, or it feels maybe daunting to have to change like a full routine. So would you say doing it in smaller stages or to make it more manageable is a good idea?
Start small changes. We're not looking for overnight perfection.
Of course.
A lot of people have such high standards for themselves. We're looking for small manageable changes, and in CBT we talk about SMART goals all the time because it's small, you can measure it, it's achievable, it's realistic, and you can measure it over time as well, which is really helpful. Because if you think about someone saying, right, I'm going to change all my habits, I'm going to get up and run 5 miles tomorrow when I've never really went for a walk around the block, you're setting yourself up for high expectations and probably low achievement.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do a couple of changes this week, that's okay.
Yeah,
and
you're
it's
more likely
achievable.
to succeed as well with
Absolutely.
that, rather than to fail if you've got lots of changes. So
Sure.
no, that's very interesting. Thank you. So in CBT, there's a specific framework that we use to look at how habit is triggered. What is the cue, routine, reward cycle?
So cue, routine, reward cue is often used, it's often coined as trigger. Okay, so the cue is the thought. Okay, so the thought is, for example, it's 9 o'clock at night. I'm sitting down in front of the TV, and the routine is at 9 o'clock, I have a bar of chocolate and a cup of tea.
Yep.
And the reward is pleasure,
Yeah.
or relaxation, or a feeling of comfort. So what happens is dopamine is released in the brain,
Okay.
which is the reward hormone. So you sit down, it's 9 o'clock, the routine is the behaviour is I'm going into the kitchen, I'm going to get a cup of tea and a bar of chocolate.
Yeah.
And so in CBT, we teach people the 3 steps of cue, routine and reward.
Okay.
And what we say is, okay, say for example, you've started on your GLP-1 journey, you're sitting down at 9 o'clock and you think to yourself, oh well, it's 9 o'clock, it's time for a cup of tea and a bar of chocolate. And then you have it, and instantly you might feel that reward, as in it's been comforting, you know, it's tasty, I feel really happy. But if you fast forward maybe 30 minutes, half an hour, feelings of shame and guilt can creep in.
Of course.
And that can really impact that cycle of unhelpful thinking, unhelpful behaviours. Before you know it, you start all or nothing thinking, which is, I've failed.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hopeless, I can't do this, I'll start again on Monday. But if you can get in and think, okay, that's automatically what I do, let's change that. It's 9 o'clock, it's time for me to do my meditation and really focus on my breathing and focus on myself and reward myself with non-food items. Changing that up can really help. So the cue is, it's 9 o'clock, I'm going to give myself a non-food reward. You do your meditation, you feel really relaxed, and you know the reward is that you've spent some time on you.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that, swapping it for something else. And even if it was swapping, say, a snack, you could do it for a healthier snack.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different options, because maybe some people, it's harder maybe for them to switch to non-food habits at the beginning. So slowly to help them build into this new routine. That's really interesting. That's good. Okay. So a lot of people think that they just need more discipline, but science suggests otherwise. Why is willpower unreliable for long-term change?
So willpower is limited. Willpower is it's based on motivation alone, which can be impacted by so many external factors. So if you think about, you know, the busy life that we lead, we can be stressed, we can have hormonal changes, you know, we can be really tired. And in actual fact, when you're tired, you are less likely to be able to resist urges. You're more likely to reach for that high sugar snack or the high fat or the ultra processed. And in actual fact, you know, when you're tired, your hunger hormone ghrelin increases, and leptin, which is the satiety hormone, reduces. So willpower alone is okay for the short term. It's okay for a kickstart, but we really need habits to form for long-term sustainable change.
And that makes sense, because in life, life is so unpredictable. So there's going to come obstacles and challenges that is going to change how you're feeling. So that willpower is very hard to sustain consistently. But like you said, it's the habits. If you change them, then that's just a lot easier, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, so we talk about nutrition and movement, but there's another biological pillar that we often overlook, and that's something we've touched on already. So why is sleep important for behaviour change? I think you've already touched on this.
So sleep is so important, it's so critical for behaviour change, because when we're tired, we are more likely to have less control over impulsive behaviours or impulsive eating. So trying to get a full night's sleep is so important. A lot of the time it gets kind of dismissed. We live in a busy world full of screens and technology, so finding ways to reduce the screen time, maybe an hour before bed, can be really helpful. Maybe doing some relaxation, some breath work, building ways of giving yourself time to go to bed in a nice dark cool room, no TV on, things like that. Because like I've already said, sleep can impact whether you're able to resist an urge or not. Sleep also increases those hunger hormones. So we can feel like we need to eat when we can't function. Sleep has an impact on how your day-to-day functions. So if you've had a night where you've had poor sleep, the whole of the rest of that day is impacted. So that can be to do with your exercise, your ability to perform well in the gym, your ability to go for a walk. All of those things are impacted, and that can have an overall lasting effect on your ability to maintain long-term change.
So most of us have habits that we perform without even thinking. Identifying them is step one. So how can people identify triggers for behaviours that they may need or want to change?
Okay, so CBT focuses on this 3-system model. And it's thoughts, behaviours and emotions. Okay, so your thoughts create an emotion. So I could say, I'm a failure, I'm never going to achieve this weight loss, and that creates an emotion of shame or guilt. And then we're less likely to follow through with the healthy habits if we're telling ourselves such critical statements. So the trigger can be unhelpful thinking. There's around about 12 general unhelpful thinking styles. Some of the most common ones are all or nothing thinking. That's where if I have one setback, I'm a failure. I'll start again on Monday and I'll just eat lots of unhealthy things. I won't exercise, I won't do my mindfulness, I'll stay up late. So actually identifying when these unhelpful thoughts come into your head, how was that kind of thinking style? Was that quite unhelpful in the way that it was all or nothing thinking? I was really being quite self-critical. Was that catastrophic thinking? Was I thinking, I'm never going to lose weight, I'm always going to be a failure, and before I know it, I'm into that kind of unhelpful maintenance cycle? So CBT helps people to identify those triggers, and a good way of doing this is a daily thought record. And what we do with that is we identify, where was I? Was this a stressful situation I was in? What was I responding to? Okay, how can I reframe that in a positive way? And a good way of doing that is to say to yourself, how would I tell my friend this? Because so often people are so self-critical, when you would be so helpful to your friend and you would say, don't worry, it's part of your journey, it's okay, let's start again, look at how far you've came. And often it's about showing people that they can reframe this, and then by doing that, they're aware and they can start to make those changes and respond to these triggers in a healthy and helpful way.
That's really nice. I really like what you said there about how speak to yourself how you would want to speak to a loved one and give them advice.
It's so powerful.
That's something that I, to be honest, have never even thought about. We're all very self-critical about everything. From if that's how you look or how maybe others perceive you, anything, you're very self-critical and self-aware, but it's nice and to work on how you've just explained that. So that's a really good takeaway.
I find that people really respond to that well, because they're able to see themselves as worthy.
So the new year, new me approach often fails because it's too much at one time. What's the best way to start building a new habit or new habits?
Okay, start small. That would be my suggestion. The way to build a new habit is start with small changes. So instead of saying, I am going to change my finances, I'm going to change my weight, I'm going to change, my exercise, everything. How about 2 changes for the week? I'm going to start introducing some nice whole nutritional foods to my diet. And I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk every day. that's small, it's achievable, and it can become consistent. And then you build. It's like building blocks. You build from that habit to another one, to progressing on to something else. And before you know it, you're making those short-term goals turn into long-term habits.
Yeah, that's a good way to like come over certain habit changes, is by doing it small and measurable, and then it's achievable as well to do.
Absolutely.
So that's really good. It's easy to stay on track when the weight is falling off, but eventually that starts to slow down. How do you maintain motivation after early results fade?
So I think motivation is quick, early results.
Yeah.
And in any weight loss journey, there will be changes.
Yep.
There will be plateaus. There will be times where you might put weight on for a number of different reasons, not because you were bad or you didn't do well, for all these other external things like hormones, stress, fatigue. But actually being able to think about not just the scales, not just the number on the scales. Okay, how do I feel?
Yeah.
I have so much more energy.
Yep.
I can look at myself in the mirror.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do that a couple of months ago. And actually, what are my reasons for doing this? I think thinking about the longer term goals and how you feel, actually how your clothes feel on you as well. They feel loose, they don't feel so tight and restricting. That's a real positive and empowering feeling for someone, rather than, I didn't lose any weight this week.
Yeah.
So all of those changes still have, but you're focusing on that one thing.
Yeah.
So it's about flipping that on its head and looking at the positives.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because we speak to patients all the time. And we're always saying to them about how, you shouldn't focus on the scales, because a lot of them start to becomes a different unhealthy habit.
Absolutely.
Of focusing too much on the numbers, but they're forgetting the fact that they've done so well, like the clothes are feel like fitting them in a different way. They're like happier with how they look. So I think it's really important to make sure that you don't get too bogged down with the numbers. Yeah. It's important to obviously track your progress, but don't dwell on it and don't become upset by it if there is like some changes that aren't happening with your weight. So yeah, that's really interesting. So eating isn't always about physical hunger. Often it's about a state of mind. So how can mindfulness reduce emotional eating?
So mindfulness allows a pause. It allows space for you to be really aware of what's happening. What is this experience? In terms of emotional eating, mindfulness allows you to really focus on the task in hand. If you put the two of those things together, actually, mindful eating, taking away screens, using your cutlery, putting your cutlery down in between bites, being really aware of what is it I'm eating, what are the flavours, what can I taste, what can I smell. Being in that moment just slows everything down and allows you an awareness. A lot of the time we eat on autopilot because we live such busy lives. So you're sitting on your phone and the food is going in and you're not even consciously aware, and before you know it, you've ate a whole plate of food and not really enjoyed it. And food is something to be enjoyed.
Exactly.
It's something to be treasured with family. So I think being really mindful can really help to reduce those impulsive emotions that can lead to self-sabotage.
So how can stress sabotage progress, and how can we manage that?
So stress can sabotage progress in the respect that our ability to resist urges can be impacted. So managing stress is really, really important. That's a part of CBT that we look in we call the 3 pillars, different domains. It's just different sections really. And so mindfulness and stress go hand in hand. So stress is part of the emotional pillar. And so managing stress through movement is really, really helpful. 10-minute walk, or I'm going to do a guided meditation. I'm going to lie down. I'm actually going to put on a lovely candle. I'm going to enjoy the smell and the fragrance from that, or I'm going to put on my nice skincare.
Yeah.
All of those things help to reduce stress. Obviously, the stress hormone is cortisol, and when cortisol raises, it makes it really difficult for you to manage your weight loss journey. It can have such a negative impact on it. So I think managing stress, we all live in a stressful world.
Yeah.
You know, we're so busy all of the time, but we have 24 hours in a day, and taking even 30 minutes of that day to really work on focusing on reducing stress can change your whole week.
It does, and I feel like that's your me time. For myself, like I've always struggled to manage how to manage my stress, but I found that like going to like gym classes and things like that was my like mind switching off. And after I finished a good workout, I felt really good afterwards. So everybody has their own thing, and it's just about finding what is it that makes you feel like happier, or that can just make you switch off and feel better.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the way that we talk to ourselves after a slip up can dictate our entire week. So what role does self-talk play? So I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit before.
Self-talk's so powerful. It can be so empowering, but it can also be so discouraging. And we talk to ourselves in such a critical way. And that inner critic, it's like a reel playing constantly in your mind. A lot of the time you're not even aware of it because it's just on a loop. And so, for example, you could be in work and you forgot to send an email, or you forgot that you're a failure. So I think that self-talk can really make or break your journey. In CBT, we teach people about self-compassion. It's huge. It's huge because what it does is it flips things up. And when we do that, one of those nice little things that we do is tell people, how would you speak to your friend? How do you speak to your child? You know, if a child made a mistake, would you say, you're a failure? You're never going to do this? Of course you wouldn't. You would be using such nurturing and encouraging words. And so self-talk can really, really help you on your journey, and it can help you to make really healthy habits in terms of, how you see yourself and your self-esteem. And when you have a good self-esteem, you're far more likely to succeed with your journey.
And I think it's something that everyone can benefit from.
Absolutely.
Like you said, we're all our biggest critics. So we do this thing where it's like you coach other people, so you can coach your children, or you're coaching your colleagues, but you need to start to learn to coach yourself and give yourself a little bit of self-love. And
Absolutely.
I think everyone really, it's something we can all do with.
It is.
Okay, so no journey is a straight line. Everyone has a bad day eventually. So how can you recover from setbacks?
The number one thing that I would say to anyone on a journey is accept. Accept and acknowledge that setbacks are part of that journey.
Okay.
Some people think that if they have a setback, that's it. I have to go back to the start again, or I'll start again on Monday, or I'm hopeless, or I'm a failure, or see, I knew I would never do this. And so having a setback needs to be addressed in a positive way. So for example, you come home, it's 9 o'clock, you want the bar of chocolate, you've had such a busy day. Sometimes we have permission thoughts. I deserve that. So you have it, and then we start to feel shame and guilt. Draw a line under it. Okay, I had the bar of chocolate. Actually, I've done so well up until now. And I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not in this for overnight perfectionism. Setbacks are part of any journey. If you think about someone learning to play the guitar, they're not going to get it right all the time. It's repetition and practice, and setbacks are part of that journey. So accepting it, I think, is a huge way of moving forward positively.
Thanks for that, Diane. So our next one is, whether it's an app or a journal, we see a lot of people logging their progress. Can tracking behaviours improve awareness?
Yes, they can. And I think tracking it's less about monitoring and scrutiny, and it's more about learning about yourself and learning about what patterns are at play. So if you think about, if you track, your food for the last 5 days, I've actually realised that when I'm tired, I want to snack late at night.
Yeah.
So we put something in place to offset that. So if you're tracking, you're aware, and you can change it.
Okay.
So you can change that pattern of behaviour. So you can say, at night time, when I'm stressed, I want to snack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare a healthy snack, or healthier snack. You know, I'm going to have a few almonds, a bit of dark chocolate, instead of having something that's full of sugar and that's going to cause difficulty sleeping. So tracking can help to educate on where you might be going slightly off piste and how you can bring it back.
So our next one is about success not just being a number on the scale, it's a fundamental change in perspective. So what mindset shifts help long-term success?
So focusing more on consistency
Okay.
and progress, and not just overnight perfectionism and success. I think a shift in your mindset from having to have everything perfect all the time can take the pressure off. It just puts the brakes on a wee bit for you, and you're able to think about daily goals. What are my goals for tomorrow? What are my goals for the week? Instead of, I have to have everything perfect all day. We are human. We cannot have perfectionism all the time. So I think, you know, changing up that mindset, actually accepting that things will go wrong on your journey, but it doesn't mean you have to give up. It just means you continue on that journey and you continue to make more positive habits. And changing your mindset to, I've got this, I'm in this for the long term, I can achieve this, instead of, what if I fail? What if I don't do this? What if I regain the weight? So I think mindset can have such a positive impact on your journey.
Absolutely. So moving on, sometimes we can't see our own blind spots when it comes to our habits. So how can therapy or coaching help with that?
I think having a therapist or a coach in your corner can just help you to have structured problem solving. And always having that other person there to discuss, how were you feeling there? How would you discuss that with your best friend? And it's just like the whole kind of habit versus willpower thing. Sometimes we just need that little bit of help. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It actually means you want it more. I think also a CBT therapist, you know, my role is to help you to challenge those limiting beliefs that have been hardwired probably since you were about 10. And so to help you identify those and to help you actually believe in your abilities, to help you build self-compassion. A lot of people don't often talk nicely to themselves. Allowing a coach to give you that ability to self-love. I think one of the other things is about navigating really difficult situations without giving up. I think having that person in your corner can just give you that push that you need. And also, my job as a CBT therapist is to make you your own best therapist, so that when our work finishes, you continue on treating yourself how you would treat your friend.
That's amazing. So if we look ahead to life after medication, or just a life of health, what does sustainable change really look like?
Sustainable change is not short-term dramatic changes. So we're not looking to, you know, lose this huge amount of weight in 1 week. Sustainable change is creating short-term goals and long-term goals, so that we can achieve those goals, and we can keep those habits going. Repetition, reinforcement keeps the healthy habits. So we're talking about 3 weeks from now, 6 months from now. And I think one of the key things in CBT is getting people to shift their attention from, I need to lose 4 stone, to, how am I going to feel next year when I go on holiday? You know, how is that going to feel? How do I feel after I've finished a class at the gym? Feels really good. So more about numbers and pressure, and more about how I'm going to feel
Yeah.
and how it's going to fit in with my lifestyle.
That's really, really good. Thank you so much, Diane. That's the last of our questions for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I think the biggest takeaway today is that weight loss isn't a moral failing. It's a biological and psychological process that needs the right systems in place. If you found these insights helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us keep bringing experts like Diane on to answer your questions. We'll see you in the next episode.